I first arrived in Sunny Haven with high hopes. The neighborhood's name alone suggested warmth, community, and all the suburban charm a new homeowner could want. Having grown up in noisy apartments, I dreamed of a quiet place where I could plant a garden, throw a frisbee in the front yard, and maybe even host the occasional cookout. My new house, a modest, single-story ranch with neatly trimmed hedges, was my personal slice of the American dream. Shortly after I moved in, I learned that Sunny Haven was governed by a homeowners association, HOA. On paper, that sounded acceptable enough. Someone to handle common areas, maintain the pool, and keep the place looking nice. However, a few neighbors quickly warned me that the HOA here was intense. They politely advised me to memorize the rulebook to avoid trouble. During that first week, I was introduced to the head of the HOA board, a middle-aged woman named Darlene Armitage, though around here, everyone secretly called her Karen due to her self-righteous attitude and habit of meddling in every imaginable detail of community life. She wore immaculate pastel suits, always carried a clipboard, and had a sour expression that suggested she believed she could run things better than anyone else on the planet. Darlene, Karen, wasted no time welcoming me. "Hello, I'm Darlene Armitage, chair of the Sunny Haven Homeowners Association. I trust you've reviewed our regulations. It's crucial you follow them to maintain the neighborhood's standards." As she spoke, her eyes flickered toward the extra bags stacked in my driveway, still unpacked from my U-Haul. She frowned disapprovingly. I quickly assured her that everything would be gone by the evening. She gave me a curt nod, tapped her pen on the clipboard, and hustled off. At first, I tried to laugh it off. I figured many suburbs had a Karen type, someone who took the HOA rules to extremes. But I had no idea how far she would go, or how bizarre things could become. Over the next few months, her behavior escalated from petty to downright outrageous, culminating in the day she decided to steal my electricity and plug in her electric car charger, without my permission, into the outdoor outlet on my property. But let me not get ahead of myself. Like any good saga, ours began with a simmer before reaching a boil. My journey in Sunny Haven started simply enough, with me learning about the HOA's demands and forging cautious friendships with neighbors who likewise felt the weight of Karen's authority pressing on every little detail of their lives. Those initial weeks, I worked tirelessly to decorate my new space. I painted the living room a gentle sage green, arranged my bookshelves, and hung pictures of family vacations on the walls. In the evenings, I'd stroll the sidewalks, greeting other residents. Most seemed friendly, if a bit guarded. I noticed they'd glance around as if worried about being overheard whenever they mentioned the HOA. I soon learned that homeowners were required to keep their lawns at a maximum height of 2 inches, hedges trimmed to a uniform shape, trash bins hidden from public view except on collection days, and any exterior modifications approved by the HOA. Violating these rules could bring fines, HOA citations, or worse. Many people abided by them for fear of conflict. The stories swirling around about Karen's retaliations were enough to keep folks in line. I made friends with Bill and Melanie, a couple who lived 2 houses away. They were around my age, easygoing, and had a pair of golden retrievers they walked daily. Over beers in my backyard, Bill filled me in. "You've got to watch out for Darlene. Karen, she'll fine you for the smallest things." One time, she sent me a notice because I painted my mailbox post a shade too dark. It wasn't even that big a difference. Melanie nodded, rolling her eyes. "And if you think that's bad, wait until you hear about the fiasco with the 4th of July decorations." She demanded everything be removed by 8 a.m. on July 5th, or else daily fines would apply. She literally roamed the streets at dawn, snapping photos of anyone who still had flags or banners out. I chuckled uneasily but felt a knot forming in my stomach. Could it really be that controlling? Yet Bill and Melanie assured me it was no exaggeration. From them, I also learned that Karen had a knack for turning on the charm in official settings, like HOA board meetings, while privately pushing for harsh penalties, threatening legal action over trivial infractions, and even peeking over fences to see if people had unapproved backyard decor. Still, I tried to keep my own place in tip-top shape, hoping not to attract her ire. I mowed my lawn religiously, pruned the hedges, and followed the bizarre color palette guidelines for my front door. Little did I know, it wouldn't take much for her to set her sights on me. The day she first left a friendly reminder slip in my mailbox was the day I realized how quickly a mild annoyance can turn into a neighborhood feud. My first official infraction arrived on a pale blue slip of paper left in my mailbox. The note read, "Notice of violation. Resident, my name. Property, my address. Infraction, outdoor hose not coiled properly, visible from street. Remedy, remove or conceal any unsightly items within 24 hours. Potential fine, $50 for each day of noncompliance." I blinked in disbelief. My garden hose had been unwound because I was in the middle of watering the newly planted flowers. In the chaos of daily life, I'd left it out that morning, but I fully intended to coil it by day's end. To my chagrin, that was apparently enough to earn an official citation. I marched over to Bill's place to show him the slip. He let out a sympathetic laugh. "Welcome to the club," he said, patting my shoulder. Melanie shook her head, muttering something about how the HOA must have nothing better to do. Determined not to escalate things, I calmly put the hose away, wrote a short letter explaining it wouldn't happen again, and mailed it to the HOA. I figured that was the end of it. But sure enough, a week later, another slip arrived. Notice of violation. Resident, my name. Property, my address. Infraction, trash bin slightly visible from sidewalk. Remedy, relocate bin behind side fence. Potential fine, $75 for repeat offense. This time, I discovered that the edge of my garbage bin was visible by about 6 inches through the gate. My side fence was short, so if one stood at the right angle, you could indeed see a corner of the bin. Ridiculous, but apparently enough to violate the no bins visible rule. I found myself muttering angrily as I repositioned the trash bin, half convinced that Karen was taking a ruler and calibrating vantage points to ensure she'd catch me. Bill insisted that she likely was. He recalled once seeing her literally lean over the sidewalk to peek between fence slats into someone's yard. Despite my frustration, I tried to remain calm. The last thing I wanted was a personal vendetta with the HOA's top dog. Some neighbors advised me to lay low, pay the occasional fine if it happened, and wait for Karen to set her sights on someone else. But that wasn't my style. I believed in fair treatment, not arbitrary harassment. Still, it was only the beginning. Soon enough, Karen would give me a real reason to fight back. One warm Saturday afternoon, I walked around to my side yard, heading toward the spigot to water my newly planted hydrangeas. On my way, I spotted something strange. A thick black cable snaking across the lawn, plugged into one of my outdoor outlets near the garage. Confused, I traced the cable's path. It led across our property line into the next yard over, a vacant lot owned by the HOA, apparently used for storage or future development. Then the cable disappeared around a corner. My heart sank. Who on earth was using my electricity without asking? I carefully unplugged the cord and walked around the fence to investigate. That's when I heard faint humming sounds and saw a sleek, white electric car parked on the vacant lot's paved area. The cord from my outlet was the car's charging cable. At that moment, who should appear but Karen, stepping out from behind the car with a look of triumph. She saw me holding her charger in my hand and gave an irritated huff. "Excuse me, that was charging my vehicle. You can't just unplug it." I stared at her, incredulous. "Karen, you're on my property, using my electrical outlet. That's electricity you didn't pay for." She rolled her eyes. "The HOA owns this lot, so I have every right to be here. Besides, the outlet is on the exterior of your home. It's practically community access. I don't see the problem." My jaw dropped. "It's not public property. That's my outdoor outlet, on my electric bill. You can't just help yourself without permission." Crossing her arms, she retorted, "I chair the HOA, and we have an easement for property maintenance. I can walk this perimeter if I want. And it's not as though I'm doing any real harm. Electric cars need charging, and your outlets are conveniently located. Don't be so dramatic." I was speechless. The nerve of this woman, stealing electricity, then acting like I was out of line for unplugging her. Eventually, I gathered my wits enough to respond. "Get your own charging station, or go to a public one. You can't just leech off my house." Karen snapped. "Fine, but I'll be discussing your rudeness at the next board meeting. This entire side yard might even be violating setback regulations. We'll have to do an inspection." And with that, she picked up her cable, stowed it in her trunk, and stormed off. My blood boiled. I told Bill about the incident later, and he whistled in disbelief. She's never tried that on me. That's brazen even for Karen, he said. What are you going to do? I shrugged, furious. I'll think of something. She can't get away with this. That night, I lay awake imagining scenarios. Could I call the police to report theft of electricity? Maybe, but Karen always had a cunning way of twisting the facts. If the police arrived, she might spin a story about how the HOA had an understanding with me. She was skilled at feigning innocence. No, I needed another approach, one that would teach her a lesson without landing me in a bureaucratic fight. Inspiration struck one morning when I recalled an old conversation with a friend who rigged up a comedic prank fan for a summer event, blasting air at passers-by as a gag. The contraption was basically a large industrial fan, built from a repurposed drum fan and some wires. That friend no longer used it and had once offered it to me if I ever had a use for it. A plan formed. If Karen tried plugging her charger into my outlet again, thinking she was sly, I could reroute the circuit to power something completely different. Something that would ensure she got zero charge, but also made it crystal clear that she was effectively paying for a high-powered fan blowing hot air, or maybe confetti, or something similarly ridiculous. The more I thought about it, the more I grinned. A comical comeuppance, indeed. It wouldn't damage her car, nor would it be physically harmful. Yet it would highlight her audacity. She'd return to find her car still drained. All the while my giant fan had been whirring away at her expense. I contacted my friend about the big drum fan. He was delighted to pass it on. I spent a few nights tinkering in my garage, hooking up wiring so that if someone plugged their cable into my custom extension, the power would bypass any actual charging port and feed the fan. I tested it a few times. Once I plugged in a random phone charger to the rig, and sure enough, the phone never charged, but the fan spun like crazy. I also installed a hidden switch so I could revert the outlet to normal usage. That way, I wouldn't sabotage my own devices. The entire contraption was a bit silly, but the idea of Karen's reaction made me laugh out loud. I wanted to see that moment of confusion and outrage when she discovered her car battery was still near empty, thanks to her own arrogant assumption that she could mooch from me. But first, I had to wait for the right opportunity. Karen was cunning. She might suspect a trick. I needed to set the trap carefully, making sure she believed everything was the same as before. If I messed up, she'd see it coming. And if she realized I was pranking her, she might retaliate with more HOA citations or even a lawsuit. So I quietly set up the fan in my backyard, hidden behind a tall row of bushes. There it waited, like a comedic weapon ready for the perfect moment. To lure Karen into repeating her theft, I intentionally left the same outdoor outlet easily accessible. I removed any suspicious signs that might warn her. Though I was tempted to write "stay away" or rig some kind of comedic sign, I refrained. Subtlety was crucial. It was possible she'd note my changes if I was too obvious. I spent an entire weekend pretending to do normal yard work, discreetly checking if she was prowling around. On Sunday evening, I noticed her white electric SUV parked near the vacant lot again. My heart pounded. Was this it? Sure enough, around twilight, she stepped out, glanced furtively around, and pulled out her charging cable. Peering through a gap in the fence, I watched as she walked up to my outlet. She tested the handle. A small click told me she'd found it unlocked, exactly as I'd left it. She plugged in her cable, waited for a moment, presumably to see if the car's indicator lights showed charging, and then smiled with smug satisfaction. Perfect. As Karen disappeared back toward her house, presumably to leave the car overnight to fill up on my dime, I sprung into action. With a flick of a hidden switch inside my garage, I activated my custom rerouting. Instantly, the fan behind the bushes roared to life. I could feel the blast of air from several yards away, the tall hedges rippling in the gust. Grinning from ear to ear, I secured the switch and tiptoed over to confirm. The industrial fan was indeed spinning at top speed, a gentle hum that blended with the ambient sounds of the neighborhood. As for Karen's car, well, it was receiving nothing. Absolutely no current made it to her battery. All night long, that fan would devour the electricity she so brazenly tried to steal. I nearly danced with glee. At last, I had a way to fight back, harmlessly enough, but undeniably. The entire scenario felt like a comedic masterpiece. My only concern was whether she'd notice before the morning. But Karen rarely checked her car more than once, so I figured she'd only discover it the next day. I was right. Morning dawned bright and hot. I woke early, anticipating the show. Sure enough, around 8 a.m., I saw Karen striding back toward the vacant lot, wearing an air of smug confidence. She approached her electric SUV, tapped the door handle, and presumably checked the battery gauge. Then, confusion flashed across her features. She walked around to the side, reinserted the cable, fiddled with it, and scowled. I watched from my living room window, stifling laughter. She moved to my outdoor outlet, jiggled the plug, then looked around suspiciously. The giant fan, still whirring at half speed, was shielded by hedges, so she might not see it right away. But she definitely heard a low roar. She followed the sound, stepping carefully through the side yard until she spotted my contraption in all its glory. The massive industrial fan pointed at the street, sapping all the electricity. A range of emotions crossed her face: shock, anger, embarrassment. She realized her car had gained virtually no charge overnight while the fan had run at full blast. The comedic visual was perfect. Her cable was effectively fueling my yard air circulation instead of powering her precious SUV. Seething, Karen yanked the plug from my outlet. Her cheeks reddened. She glanced around as if seeking an audience, but no one else was outside. I considered popping out with a casual greeting, but decided to watch her meltdown from the shadows. It was glorious enough. After a few moments of huffing, she stormed off. In the next hour, I received no fewer than 3 phone calls from the HOA office number. I let them all go to voicemail. By midday, I found a letter taped to my door. Notice: unauthorized use of electrical wiring/code violation. Your unauthorized mechanical device is causing a disturbance and interfering with standard HOA rights. You are in violation of Sunny Haven's external fixture guidelines. Please remove the device immediately or face escalating fines. It was rich that she claimed I was violating guidelines for having a fan in my backyard, especially considering she was the one hooking her charger into my outlet without consent. But that was Karen's style. Always twist the narrative so that she's the victim or the enforcer of rules. I debated how to respond. Part of me wanted to escalate further, but another part recognized that exposing her attempted theft in a public forum, like an HOA meeting, might do the trick. Meanwhile, my comedic vengeance had only fueled her wrath, and I suspected she'd doubled down on me with the HOA's authority behind her. Rather than retreat, Karen tripled her efforts to make my life difficult. Over the next week, I received citations for ridiculous claims. My bird feeder was non-compliant with wildlife feeding regulations, the color of my garden hose was not in line with the approved palette, and my mailbox post needed repainting because it showed signs of wear. This last one was laughable. The post was brand new. She also started sending me letters about community disturbance, implying my fan was generating too much noise. Never mind that it only ever ran at night if she tried to plug in her charger. The hypocrisy was astounding, but in her mind, she was simply employing the HOA's rulebook as a weapon. Meanwhile, Bill and Melanie told me their own mailbox was plastered with new warnings, too. Apparently, Karen believed they were conspiring with me. My side yard occasionally had footprints that suggested she was poking around, possibly looking for more violations to pin on me. It was borderline stalking. I considered telling the local police about her electric theft, but ironically, hooking her charger up to my fan arrangement was a gray area. Sure, she was stealing electricity, but I had effectively used it to power my own device, turning the tables. The entire episode was comedic sabotage, not exactly a standard legal complaint. Also, I suspected Karen might deny everything or claim ignorance. However, the repeated citations and threats of fines were wearing me down. I told Bill, she's turning this into a war. I can't keep paying fines or writing appeals. Maybe I should gather evidence and present it at the next HOA meeting. If other neighbors see how she's abusing the rulebook for personal vendettas, they might push back. Bill nodded. We'll back you up. A bunch of folks resent her tyranny. If you can show clear proof of her malicious or self-serving behavior, maybe the board will finally do something. So I began documenting everything meticulously: photos, date-stamped images of my mailbox's condition, recordings of the fan's decibel level, which was actually within permissible limits, and so forth. The goal: demonstrate that Karen was issuing baseless citations, overshadowing real community interests with her personal vendetta. The more I spoke with neighbors, the more stories I heard of Karen's outrageous meddling. An older gentleman named Frank recalled how Karen once demanded he remove a small statue of St. Francis from his flower bed because it wasn't board-approved lawn decor. Another neighbor, Cynthia, said that Karen wrote her a nasty letter about the color of her holiday lights, threatening $100 per day fines if she didn't switch them to a hue consistent with the HOA's official seasonal guidelines. I asked them if they'd be willing to share these stories publicly, perhaps in a group complaint or at an open HOA forum. Most expressed fear. Karen was known to retaliate. But eventually, seeing that I was serious about confronting her, a small coalition formed. Bill and Melanie, Frank, Cynthia, and a handful of others who'd had enough. We decided to gather all our citations, letters, and any photographic evidence of Karen's hypocrisy. After all, many had seen her leave her own trash can out for longer than allowed, or park illegally on the curb. But no one dared call her out until now. We present a united front at the upcoming HOA meeting. That monthly meeting approached quickly. Karen, presumably aware of my organizing, plastered the neighborhood with flyers about maintaining community standards and respecting the authority of the HOA board. She was essentially trying to reaffirm her power. I steeled myself for a showdown, not entirely sure how it would go. On the evening of the HOA meeting, I arrived at the local community center. Rows of folding chairs faced a long table where Karen and her board members typically presided. The atmosphere was tense. More residents than usual filled the seats, whispering among themselves. I recognized quite a few who had privately complained about Karen's heavy-handedness, but rarely showed up to meetings. At exactly 7 p.m., Karen cleared her throat and tapped the microphone. She wore a smug smile, scanning the crowd. "Welcome, neighbors. We have a busy agenda tonight, including some important clarifications on our exterior maintenance rules." She began the meeting with mundane updates, landscaping, budgets for a new playground, etc. Then, an agenda item labeled Community Concerns opened the floor to residents. I signaled I wanted to speak. Karen gave a tight nod, obviously expecting me. "Yes, you have something to share?" I stepped to the front, my notes trembling slightly in my grip. "Thank you. I'd like to address multiple citations that I and several neighbors have received recently, ones we believe are baseless or unfairly enforced. Additionally, I want to call attention to a certain incident involving the unauthorized use of my electrical outlet." A ripple of murmurs spread. Karen folded her arms. "We enforce rules uniformly. If you've received citations, it's due to non-compliance with neighborhood guidelines." I smiled, trying to remain calm. "Well, I've documented every alleged infraction, along with photos. For instance, the citation about my hose being uncoiled, taken while I was in the middle of watering. The citation about my trash bin being visible, even though it was mostly behind a gate. The mailbox wear, which wasn't real. And there's more. Other neighbors have similar stories." Bill and Melanie stood up, holding copies of their own citations. Frank and Cynthia raised their hands, referencing their experiences. A small wave of frustration filled the room, with more voices chiming in about how petty and excessive these rules had become. Karen tried to maintain control. "The board stands by its standards to keep property values high. If you want to file a complaint, you must follow the official procedure, submitting forms, paying administrative fees, etc." That elicited groans from the audience. But I pressed on. "We also have evidence that you, Ms. Armitage, personally used my outdoor electrical outlet to charge your vehicle without permission. When confronted, you threatened further inspections instead of apologizing. That's theft of electricity." A hush fell. Karen's face flushed. She sputtered. "That's preposterous. I never. If I used any outlet, it was under the assumption the HOA had an agreement for community easement. Besides, you're the one with a suspicious contraption, a giant fan that's likely against code." She glanced at the other board members, who shifted uncomfortably. Some looked surprised. They probably had no clue Karen was siphoning power from residents. Meanwhile, Bill spoke up. "We have a video of her car parked there, the cable leading to your outlet. We can show it now, if the board will allow." That revelation sparked more chatter. Karen's eyes bulged. "You can't violate my privacy by filming me." Someone in the crowd muttered, "You can't violate his property by stealing electricity." Laughter rippled. Karen's meltdown was beginning in earnest. Cornered and flustered, Karen tried to switch tactics. She brandished a thick binder of HOA policies, flipping pages hurriedly. All of these so-called violations are necessary for maintaining the integrity of Sunny Haven. If you refuse to comply, we have the right to assess fines and place liens on your home if needed. A collective gasp echoed. People looked at one another in shock. Karen was threatening liens? That was a serious escalation. Typically, liens were a last resort after repeated, major offenses. Using that card to silence critics made her appear tyrannical. I leaned in. It seems you're proving our point. These rules are weaponized for personal vendettas. This has gone beyond normal HOA responsibilities. We're asking the board to step in and restore fairness. We can't let one person's personal grudges overshadow the community's best interests. A few board members exchanged wary glances. One, a man named Randall, cleared his throat. Karen, we were not aware you were personally charging your car from a residence outlet. That's irregular. Perhaps we should table any pending fines and form a committee to review these citations, especially if some appear baseless or retaliatory. Karen whipped her head toward Randall, glaring. You're undermining the board's authority, she hissed. But Randall shrugged apologetically. It was clear even he felt the pressure from the roomful of residents who had been singled out for petty or fabricated reasons. The tension soared. Karen realized she was losing control of the narrative. She threatened to adjourn the meeting, but Randall objected, stating that adjournment required a board vote. Several other board members seemed to side with him. She was outnumbered. Sensing her hold slipping, Karen slammed the binder shut and declared, Fine. If that's how you want to handle it, we'll have an internal review. But I assure you, I've done nothing illegal. I act in the best interest of Sunny Haven. With that, she abruptly ended the session, ignoring the protests of other attendees who still had questions. Though the meeting ended on a dramatic note, in the days that followed, an internal review committee formed. Randall led it, joined by 3 other board members, including a mild-mannered woman named Clara who seemed genuinely interested in fairness. Their job was to re-examine complaints about Karen's leadership, the suspicious citations, and the alleged electricity theft. Karen was furious. She continued sending me letters, demanding that I remove my industrial hazard fan from the backyard. She also threatened to fine Bill and Melanie for improper dog walking, claiming their retrievers sometimes stepped onto a neighbor's lawn. The neighbor in question had no complaints, apparently. Her desperation to maintain power was showing. At the same time, more neighbors, emboldened by our confrontation, came forward with grievances. The committee was swamped with documents showing questionable citations and evidence of Karen ignoring the same rules she enforced. One neighbor provided time-stamped photos of Karen's SUV blocking the sidewalk overnight, a direct violation she would normally punish with a $100 fine if anyone else had done it. Within a week, rumors spread that the internal review had uncovered serious irregularities in the HOA's finances, including suspicious expenses labeled as community enhancements, with no clear explanation. People whispered that Karen might have been funneling HOA funds into personal projects or using them to finance the vacant lot's landscaping so she could conveniently park and charge her car there. Amid these revelations, Karen's facade cracked. She doubled down on intimidation tactics, hinting that the committee had no real power and that she, as chair, could veto any decision she deemed detrimental. But her bravado rang hollow. Once you lose the trust of your own board, the fall can be swift. The tipping point arrived when a few neighbors, fed up with Karen's repeated trespassing and unauthorized use of their outlets, banded together to file a police report for petty theft of electricity. Initially, the police seemed hesitant. These cases can be messy, often requiring direct evidence or repeated offenses. Yet multiple residents had proof, photos, eyewitness accounts, and testimonies. My giant fan stunt inadvertently helped, too, because I had date-stamped pictures of the cable plugged in and an explanation of how I discovered it. The local detectives launched a preliminary investigation. They interviewed Karen, who scoffed at the idea that plugging into an outdoor outlet counted as theft. She argued it was common courtesy to share resources in the community. But the investigators saw through her rationalizations. They also uncovered contradictory statements about her location on certain dates. That, combined with the HOA's finance irregularities, sparked deeper scrutiny. Suddenly, the issue wasn't just about small-scale electricity theft. It was about potential misuse of HOA funds and possible fraud. If Karen had spent association money on personal gains or used her authority to reassign budget lines, that could lead to criminal charges. The board's internal review discovered questionable invoices for security improvements that never materialized. On further inspection, some checks had been written out to a shell company with ties to Karen's sister. One detective confided to me that they were building a case for felony charges, depending on the financial evidence. The comedic fiasco about the fan and the stolen electricity was overshadowed by allegations of embezzlement. Karen, once the unstoppable neighborhood queen, now faced serious legal trouble. The climate in Sunny Haven shifted dramatically. The once fearful residents grew bold. Freed from Karen's intimidation, they organized community gatherings without worrying she'd show up with her clipboard to list infractions. People started painting their front doors in bright, cheerful colors, adding whimsical garden gnomes, and letting their kids draw chalk art on the sidewalks. Little acts of rebellion that signaled the end of an oppressive era. I felt relief and satisfaction that our comedic scheme with the fan, though silly, played a part in exposing Karen's misdeeds. Still, I remained cautious. Until an official verdict came down, she was capable of last-minute sabotage. Indeed, she attempted to call an emergency HOA meeting to reinstate order. But hardly anyone attended, and those who did wore scowls of contempt. Meanwhile, Randall's review committee delivered a scathing report to the broader board, detailing Karen's possible violations. They recommended her immediate removal as chair and the appointment of an interim leader until new elections could be held. The day that recommendation went public, Karen's meltdown was apocalyptic. She sent a mass email calling Randall and the others traitors and accusing them of conspiring to destroy the neighborhood's moral fabric. Ironically, her unhinged rant only solidified the board's resolve. Within a month of the fiasco, the board voted Karen out by a decisive margin. She refused to accept the decision, claiming it was illegal. But the HOA's bylaws allowed for a no-confidence vote, and that's exactly what happened. For a time, Karen tried to remain in her house, even after being stripped of her HOA authority. Neighbors iced her out, avoiding conversation or glaring when she passed. She responded with haughty arrogance, telling anyone who'd listen that she was still the rightful leader. That charade ended the moment the police investigation concluded with formal charges. Officers arrived on a sunny afternoon, stepping out of a squad car parked in front of Karen's driveway. The scene played out in front of multiple witnesses, including me. They knocked on her door, served her with a warrant relating to fraudulent bookkeeping and misappropriation of HOA funds. She was led away in handcuffs, shouting indignantly about how she was framed by incompetent neighbors. A hush fell over the block after the squad car drove off. Some watched from windows, while others gathered in small knots on the sidewalk. Bill approached me, exhaling slowly. Wow, guess that's the end of Karen in Sunny Haven. I nodded, feeling both relief and a strange sadness. As toxic as Karen had been, seeing her arrested was sobering. But she'd brought it on herself with her arrogance, theft, and financial misdeeds. The system had caught up to her, ironically triggered by something as silly as mooching electricity for her electric SUV and powering my giant fan instead. The legal fallout was swift once prosecutors examined the HOA's financial records. Karen faced multiple felonies, including embezzlement, fraud, and possible money laundering. Over time, more questionable transactions emerged, linking her to an account that received monthly consulting fees from the HOA's budget, though no one on the board had approved such an expense. Her trial made headlines in local news. She tried to mount a defense, claiming she worked tirelessly for the community and deserved compensation. The jury saw through her rationalizations. As for the electricity theft, that charge alone might have been minor, but it painted a picture of her disregard for boundaries, part of the broader pattern of misconduct. Ultimately, the court found her guilty on several counts. In addition to jail time, the judge ordered restitution to the HOA for misused funds, and since she lacked the cash to repay everything, the court approved the confiscation of her property. Her beloved house in Sunny Haven went on auction to cover part of the damages. The proceeds helped the HOA recover from its budget shortfalls. Some neighbors joked that the new buyer was basically paying for the Karen Memorial Home, though that was never its official name. When the gavel fell, sentencing her to a prison term. The tension that had gripped Sunny Haven for so long evaporated. Karen's reign was decisively ended. The final blow came when her car, the same electric SUV that started it all, was repossessed too, as part of the asset seizure. Poetic justice, indeed. In the months after Karen's downfall, Sunny Haven restructured its HOA leadership. Randall was appointed interim president, with Clara as vice president. They passed new measures ensuring transparency, open budget sessions, clear rules that required a majority board vote for any citations, and an appeals process that was fair and straightforward. The oppressive environment of petty fines vanished. Neighbors marveled at how quickly the atmosphere changed. The new board even relaxed some of the more ludicrous regulations. Now you could have a garden hose in plain sight while actively watering, or choose from a broader paint palette for your mailbox. Freed from the constant fear of micromanagement, the community bloomed with personality. Colorful flower beds, small yard sculptures, kids playing games on driveways, and a general sense of neighborly warmth that had been missing. The story of Karen's stolen car charger and the giant fan became something of a local legend. People laughed about how that single comedic incident served as the catalyst for unraveling her more serious crimes. Though it was humiliating for her in the moment, it also served as the spark that lit the fuse, prompting residents to unite and question her authority on every front. I reconnected the outlet in a normal fashion, retiring my giant fan to the garage. Occasionally, Bill teased me, "You should keep the fan as a trophy, like a symbol of how you toppled the HOA tyrant." We'd share a laugh, recalling the comedic brilliance of the plan. With Karen gone, my daily routine felt lighter. No more blue slips for minor infractions. No more suspicious phone calls about uncoiled hoses. I could park my car in the driveway without worrying that she'd photograph its tires if they touched the grass. Best of all, I could greet neighbors at the mailbox without that collective sense of dread that Karen might swoop in with a clipboard. I even installed a modest little fountain on my front porch, something that, under Karen's rule, would have required multiple forms and an architectural review. Now, I simply mentioned it to Randall at a block party, and he gave a thumbs up, joking, "We trust you not to turn it into a 3-story water slide." We held a community barbecue in the park to celebrate the new era. More than half the neighborhood showed up, bringing potluck dishes and easy smiles. Someone jokingly set up a Karen effigy piñata, though the new HOA board politely asked that we keep the festivities tasteful. Even so, that comedic spirit permeated the event, a shared relief at having reclaimed the sense of togetherness that Karen's reign had stifled. Months later, Karen's sentencing hearing arrived. A handful of curious neighbors attended, including Bill, Melanie, and me. We watched from the gallery as the judge recounted her crimes: embezzlement of HOA funds, falsifying records, petty theft of utilities, among other charges. Karen stood with her head bowed, no longer the imperious figure we once knew. Her lawyer argued for leniency, citing her supposed philanthropic efforts and health concerns. The prosecutor countered that she abused a position of trust, harming not only the finances of an entire neighborhood, but also the sense of security for numerous residents. In the end, the judge sentenced Karen to several years in state prison and mandated restitution to the HOA. They also noted the property seizure order and the repossession of her electric SUV, which was sold off at auction. The final blow to her pride was the judge's admonishment: "You used your authority to bully and steal. This community placed its trust in you, and you grossly violated that trust." Karen was taken away in cuffs. I watched her expression, a mix of resignation and bitterness. Strangely, I felt a twinge of pity amid the triumph. We never wanted her life ruined, just fairness. But her unwavering arrogance led her down that path of no return. With Karen behind bars and her house sold, the last vestiges of her rule vanished. The new HOA leadership thrived, focusing on genuine improvements, better landscaping, a stronger neighborhood watch, and more social events. The sense of unity soared. I continued meeting with Bill and Melanie for barbecues. Frank put his St. Francis statue back in the front yard, no longer harassed for it. Cynthia decked her porch with multicolored lights that stayed up far past any official season. It was a small reflection of freedom. Nobody hounded her to remove them. Occasionally, a newcomer to Sunny Haven would hear whispers about the infamous Karen who once reigned. We'd share highlights of the story, from the petty citations to the comedic moment she discovered her car hadn't charged overnight, courtesy of the giant fan. It became a local anecdote about how an overbearing HOA official was outwitted by a creative bit of mischief. For me, the moral of the tale was that, yes, HOAs can be beneficial when they foster a spirit of collaboration. But if a self-appointed tyrant seizes power and wields the rulebook like a weapon, neighbors can unite and push back, even in comedic ways. My giant fan scheme wasn't exactly a conventional solution, but it was the spark that compelled everyone to examine her wrongdoing more closely. As time passed, life settled into a pleasant routine. I woke up each day feeling at ease, took morning walks with a cup of coffee, and sometimes paused to chat with neighbors about daily life. The daisies in my garden thrived, no longer overshadowed by threats of unsightly growth. On the weekends, Bill and I would grill burgers in my backyard. The fan itself, ironically, stayed in my garage, and used, but always there as a fond memory of when creativity triumphed over pettiness. We still had HOA meetings, but they were friendly affairs now. Randall and Clara oversaw them with professionalism and empathy, ensuring that any disputes were handled calmly. The documents were transparent, finances were meticulously reported, and any rule changes or fines required consensus. The transformation was night and day from Karen's era, proving that the right leadership can make an HOA function positively. As for Karen's old house, it eventually sold to a young family with 2 kids who loved riding bikes. Neighbors joked that the ghost of Karen might still lurk in that house, scowling at any sign of fun. But the new owners showed zero interest in controlling anyone's yard. They painted the shutters bright yellow, which Karen would have detested, and everyone else adored. Times had changed. People sometimes asked if I regretted the fan prank, if I worried it was petty. In truth, a small part of me wondered if I should have handled things differently. Could I have confronted Karen diplomatically from the start, or involved the board sooner? Possibly. But given her track record, it's unlikely she'd have listened. She thrived on intimidation, not compromise. By the time she was plugging her car charger into my outlet, it was clear that standard approaches wouldn't work. The comedic twist was the impetus that spurred broader neighborhood action. It forced her to reveal the depths of her entitlement, leading others to come forward about more serious misdeeds. In a sense, her downfall was of her own making. She kept doubling down, never showing humility or remorse. I also realized how important it is for communities to watch over their local governance structures. HOAs can be beneficial, maintaining shared amenities, preserving property values, but they're only as good as the people in charge. If power goes unchecked, you could end up with a Karen who twists regulations for personal gain. In quiet moments, I felt a certain gratitude that we caught her sooner rather than later. Who knows how much more money she might have embezzled, or how many families she would have terrorized. At least the final outcome brought justice, and Sunny Haven was free to thrive as it should. Years passed. Occasionally, we heard tidbits about Karen from local news or court updates. She served her sentence, and upon release, had to abide by strict probation conditions. Her assets were long gone, including the property in Sunny Haven. Rumor had it she moved to another state, where she lived more modestly, presumably under a watchful eye. No one in Sunny Haven missed her. Some joked that she might join another HOA somewhere and try the same tactics. Then again, with her criminal record, it would be tough to hold any leadership position in a community. Besides, word travels fast in suburban circles. Any prospective neighborhood would likely do a background check, discover her convictions, and close that door quickly. If Karen learned anything, I hope it was that arrogance and bullying have consequences. Perhaps she'd find a less controlling path in life. Or maybe she'd remain bitter. Either way, it was no longer our concern. At block parties, folks still teased me about the giant fan. They'd say, "Hey, can we plug into your outlet? Need a quick charge," and I'd respond, "Sure, but watch out, you might be powering my new leaf blower." It became a local legend. Karen tries to steal electricity, gets a face full of fan. People recounted it with laughter, especially new neighbors who needed a comedic introduction to the old HOA regime. While it was undeniably a revenge prank, it carried a moral message about boundary crossing. If you try to mooch resources from others without permission, you might end up paying an unexpected price. Kids who grew up in the neighborhood heard the story from their parents. Some claimed it sounded made up, but the actual remains of that large industrial fan sitting in my garage were tangible proof. Every so often, I'd open the garage door, see the dusty contraption, and smile. I'd recall Karen's outraged face when she realized her car was still at near-zero battery after charging all night. Despite the comedic aura, it also reminded me that one person's overreach can unify an entire community. Before the fan incident, I was just a new resident, uncertain if I could challenge the HOA boss. After it, I found allies, discovered shared grievances, and spurred real change. The fan was more than a prop, it was a catalyst. Today, Sunny Haven is a pleasant, friendly place. Our gardens bloom with diverse colors. Our sidewalks are full of chalk drawings, and nobody peeks over fences with a clipboard. The HOA, under new leadership, focuses on positive community events like food drives, neighborhood watch programs, and improvements to the little park. Residents talk to each other without fear. We handle minor disputes with direct conversation rather than a barrage of citations. I still own the same single-story ranch house, though it's now surrounded by new additions, a small gazebo in the backyard, the bird feeder by the patio, and a well-used grill station. None of it has drawn any punitive letters or threats. The neighborhood discovered that true community spirit isn't about imposing uniformity. It's about respecting each other's spaces and celebrating our differences. Whenever an acquaintance asks me about HOAs, maybe they're considering moving to a place that has one, I offer this cautionary tale. HOAs aren't inherently bad, I say, but if you ever find a Karen in charge, watch out. Oh, and if that Karen tries to steal your outlet, a giant fan might be the perfect comeback. The baffled looks I get are priceless. And so ends the saga of how plugging an electric car into my outlet led to the downfall of the most overbearing HOA tyrant Sunny Haven ever knew. The final moral? No matter how pushy the neighbor, no matter how petty the tyranny, sometimes a bit of creativity, unity, and a strong gust of wind can blow them right off their self-made throne.